nothing else but invade their own privacy every hour of the day. And I do think the use of the children is quite reprehensible.
Well,
And Harry introducing his children to England. It ain't going to be like that. And there's a long way to go before...
Our dream girl, happy 5th birthday, Lily, the As Ever founder captioned her post alongside a white heart emoji.
Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor, more specifically her name, is already making headlines. With conflict...
But the monarch and King Charles has only met Lily once, who is named after Queen Elizabeth's childhood nickname, seemingly against her chagrin.
More than 30 years since the media baron Robert Maxwell fell to his death off the back of his yacht, Lady Ghislaine.
Their privacy had been under siege relentlessly, every single hour of every day. What made it even more unsettling was how their children were used as pawns in a story that seemed to thrive on exploiting innocence. The idea of Prince Harry unveiling his kids to the public eye under such conditions? It wasn't going to happen quietly or easily. There was still an arduous journey ahead, filled with layers of complexity and resistance. Behind the scenes, a web of powerful individuals believed, with quiet confidence, that they could bury the story before it ever saw the light of day. Each one tried their best, through lawsuits, threats, and pressure campaigns designed to silence and intimidate.
It's known for his unauthorised biographies, including the recently re-released publication about one of Britain's most controversial.
But every pushback only fueled the fire further. Instead of diminishing the investigation, their efforts became a tangled part of a growing mountain of evidence. What Tom Bower understood, and what those caught in his sights never really grasped until it was irrevocably late, was this. Investigative journalism operates on an entirely different level than traditional tabloid fodder. A tabloid story? It can be bought off with hush money, silenced with threats, or overshadowed by flashier headlines. But Bower's work? It's a painstaking process built on years of meticulous cross-checking, thorough testimony gathering, paper trails, and reliable sourcing. And every time someone tries to dispute it or cover it up, it only adds another data point to an ever-strengthening record. By the time his subjects truly realize just how massive and damning the dossier he's created has become, the game is already over. The real question isn't if the story will emerge. It's how much harm a counterattack can actually cause to their own reputation. The Sussexes had vast resources at their disposal. They enlisted lawyers unafraid to fight and win.
He, Tom Bower, has made a career out of constructing ever more elaborate theories about people he does not know and
in court, they commanded a global platform with sympathetic media voices spanning 2 continents. And for over 3 years, they carefully molded a public narrative painting themselves not as architects of their story, but as victims of a rigid institution. They had every reason to believe they were untouchable, shielded from any meaningful challenge. But what they overlooked, and something that every one of Bower's former targets underestimated, is that none of those defenses matter once the investigator has already completed his work in secret, far ahead of the public spotlight. And Tom Bower had already crossed that threshold on the eerie morning of October 31st, 2022, Halloween Day. When Good Morning Britain booked him, no one expected fireworks. He was slated to be just another commentator weighing in on a saga the British press had been dissecting for years. The anticipation was for the usual measured dialogue, careful phrasing, diplomatic remarks, and the kind of gentle analysis that fills airtime without rocking the boat. But that's not what happened. Within minutes of sitting down, Bower unleashed a statement so unexpected it instantly froze the room.
I said in 2 words, desperation and failure. Meghan is someone who is desperate for fame. She's desperate.
I don't mind, Harry. It's Meghan I'm after. There was no showmanship, no agitation, just blunt truth delivered by someone whose research was already complete, whose case had already been built beyond dispute. The hosts quickly pressed back. After all, challenging a guest is their job, their moment to push for clarity or defense. But Bower didn't flinch. He doubled down. He went on to highlight not vague suspicions or general unease, but 17 specific inconsistencies found in the Oprah interview, pointing out clear contradictions with precision and confidence. This was no simple commentary. This was the moment when a story shifted from rumor to damning revelation, and the world was about to see it unfold. 17 separate, meticulously sourced claims, each backed by thorough documentation, were delivered live on air, straight from Bower's memory, without a single note or moment of hesitation. It was a masterclass in calm, poised storytelling. Almost instantly, as if triggered by some invisible switch, the clip exploded across the internet. Within mere minutes, it was everywhere. And by that same evening, it had amassed millions of views.
Harry holds Lily in his arms as he and Meghan beam at her, with the As Ever founder resting her hand on her husband's shoulder.
It's about whether the Queen was asked permission or just told by Harry and Meghan they were using her nickname.
The comments section, as usual, divided sharply. On one side were those who had been waiting, sometimes silently hoping, for someone to finally say it out loud, confirming suspicions they'd held for months or even years. On the other side were defenders who saw this very clip as the perfect example of the institutional resistance, the kind of systemic opposition the Sussexes had long spoken about. Both camps missed the point entirely, because neither the audience in the studio nor viewers at home realized what was really happening behind the scenes. By the time Bauer shared those claims on live television, his investigation had moved far beyond Meghan herself. The book was nearly finished. Sources had been painstakingly cross-referenced. Every document had been verified for authenticity. What Bauer was revealing wasn't the straightforward narrative the public expected. It wasn't simply about Meghan's behavior, inconsistencies in the Oprah interview, or the disconnect between the Sussexes' public statements and the private accounts from former colleagues.
Respondent said on the radio today.
The Queen was not asked. The palace source is absolutely adamant.
Harry and Meghan were threatening to sue people who disagreed and said that wasn't the case, and now this book is saying, actually, we back the palace on this one, which is...
Although all of those elements were carefully documented, no, the heart of the investigation had shifted to a much more personal and nuanced place. This was something that couldn't easily be dismissed as media hostility, racial bias, or institutional prejudice aimed at a Black American woman who had married into one of the most traditional families in the world and refused to quietly disappear. This new focus had quietly but intentionally shifted away from Meghan and towards something, or rather, someone else. That someone was a young girl named Lilibet. The questions Bauer had meticulously pieced together surrounding her weren't about gossip or rumor. They were about patterns. Patterns in the careful choice of her name, the tightly controlled nature of her christening, the deliberate, choreographed image crafted for every public appearance she had ever made. These weren't the kind of questions a simple press release could answer or a legal threat could silence. These were questions that revealed a subtle, documented trajectory, a story completely different from the carefully curated one the Sussexes had spent years shaping in the public eye.
It never ends. Even 100th birthday, they still got to come forward and never have the decency or wherewithal to be like,
and Harry has been released, which reveals even more details about why they allegedly decided to step away as royals.
Bauer understood something crucial that morning, something his critics often overlooked. He wasn't on live TV aiming to win a quick debate, earn a fleeting viral moment, or trade opinions. He was there because when you have spent years constructing a foundation so deep and detailed, you don't hide what you've found. Instead, you let the world know it's coming and then pay close attention to what the silence that follows will tell you about whether you truly got it right. And that silence said everything. No injunctions, no counterclaims, no formal statements or legal letters. Nothing. Especially notable was the absence of any response from a team that had already proven in British court it knew how to fight and win. Just silence. And in the stillness of that silence, Bauer's real focus waited patiently. Not a person, not a broad narrative or the machinery of media influence, but a single name. That's where this story truly began. Some names belong to the public realm, printed on newspaper pages, spoken aloud on television, passed around among strangers who feel entitled to know every detail of a life. But this was different. This name was about much more than just public perception. There's a certain kind of intimacy in names, an unspoken closeness that only a select few ever truly share. Then, there are names that almost no one outside a tight circle ever gets to hear or use.
And also concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
Yeah, the invitations were sent out, but if the palace knows nothing about it, obviously they didn't get an invite.
Lilibet was one of those rare names. It wasn't just a name. It was a deeply personal nickname, whispered in the quietest corners of a very public life. Lilibet was Queen Elizabeth II's childhood attempt at saying her own name, a sweet, imperfect sound that her closest family embraced and cherished. It was used by her parents, by her husband, and by only a handful of people who existed within the smallest, most protected circle of her life. This nickname was never meant for the world, never splashed across headlines or official announcements. For more than 70 years, arguably the most intensely chronicled reign in British royal history, this tiny secret remained safeguarded like a precious treasure, hidden behind the fortress of protocols and traditions that surround royalty. That privacy wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate choice, fiercely guarded across the decades, held close as one of the last pieces of unfiltered human connection in a world relentlessly public. So, when Harry and Meghan stepped forward with a bombshell announcement in June 2021, revealing that their newborn daughter would be named Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor, the reaction inside the palace didn't soften. It sent ripples of shock through the monarchy's inner sanctum.
Explain the difference between Prince and Princess and having HRH on top of that.
I'm so glad you raised this, Koshi, because again,
This wasn't a simple gesture of family affection. It felt like a move that blurred lines long kept clear, stirring feelings of suspicion and unease. The BBC was the first to bring this story into the spotlight, and they reported it bluntly, without sugarcoating a single detail. According to their report, the Queen had not been consulted or given a blessing before the Duke and Duchess shared the name publicly. It wasn't just a minor oversight, the palace insisted. They said she had been told, not consulted, and their support for this version of the story was unwavering. There were no evasions or half-statements, just a firm, public backing of the BBC's account. But Harry and Meghan's team pushed back hard, through official channels, contesting the palace's version head-on. They claimed the Queen had indeed been consulted and greeted the choice with warmth, dismissing the narrative of secrecy as false.
By issuing letters patent to give his grandchildren Archie and Lily the Prince and Princess titles. However, they will...
Suddenly, the story split into two starkly different versions, two camps utterly convinced of their own truth. And in the middle of this tug-of-war lay a murky reality, one carefully protected and yet ripe for discovery. Bauer, a seasoned expert with 25 years of experience in navigating and uncovering stories like this, knew exactly where to look. His career had been built on peeling back layers of carefully managed narratives, and while the palace was no amateur at controlling their story, Harry and Meghan were relatively new to the public eye and still figuring out how to handle their own media image. This name, the choice of Lilibet, wasn't just a personal tribute or an emotional nod. It was a symbol charged with extraordinary weight, made even more significant by timing. Because by the time this name was announced, Harry and Meghan had spent the previous year and a half steadily dismantling their ties to the monarchy in the public sphere. They had stepped away from royal duties, engaged in high-profile interviews like the one with Oprah.
Stay in a royal palace provided by the king himself. We've got the legendary Tom.
And opened up about feelings of isolation, lack of support, and being sidelined. Their words painted a consistent picture worldwide. A couple disillusioned with the institution, publicly voicing disappointment, and ultimately choosing to carve out a new path far from the royal spotlight. And yet, despite this growing distance, they gave their daughter a name steeped in the monarchy's most private, most guarded traditions. An intimate symbol linked to the Queen herself. It was a paradox that sent shockwaves, a gesture so tender, so deeply connected to the heart of the royal family, coming at a moment marked by conflict and estrangement. The name Lilibet wasn't just a name. It was a story waiting to be unraveled, carrying all the contradictions, tensions, and secrets of this historic chapter.
Nobody ever asked them, do you regret having lied to Oprah Winfrey? Do you regret having lied on Netflix?
Insiders didn't see this as a genuine slip-up or a moment of sincere contradiction. Instead, they read it as a deeply strategic move, one meticulously crafted to cling to a fragile emotional link with the monarchy. It was like a subtle tug on that emotional thread at a moment when the public narrative demanded they appear as if they were walking entirely away from it. Imagine this. On one hand, they hold onto the connection, the personal bond, while with the other, they raise a figurative flag signaling departure in the very photo of those walking away. This wasn't a simple mishap or innocent confusion. It was documented, carefully sourced, and refused to disappear into the background noise. The tension didn't fade. It lingered, unresolved and telling. Fast forward to a moment just weeks ago, June 4th, 2026. A quiet birthday tribute appears on Meghan's Instagram. Our dream girl. Happy 5th birthday, Lily. But here's what stood out. Comments were turned off. Now, on the surface, a mother marking her daughter's 5th birthday on one of the most followed social media accounts in the world seems like a sweet, natural gesture.
Deranged conspiracy and melodrama. That's how Harry and Meghan have described Tom Bower's explosive new book about.
Turning off comments might seem unusual, but not completely out of the ordinary. Except, this wasn't just any child. This wasn't just any celebration. The silence spoke volumes. Those comments weren't disabled because of random, unpleasant messages flooding in from strangers. No, there was a deeper reason. The questions tied to that name. Lily. Those questions, after 5 years, still had no answers. It was as if the name itself needed protection, still guarded from the relentless curiosity and speculation of the world. And in this case, the need for shielding was still very real. But the name was only the beginning of a far bigger story. Jump back to June 2022. The setting. The Platinum Jubilee. 70 years on the throne, the longest reign in British royal history. This was a monumental celebration, one that drew attention like a magnet from every corner of the globe, pulling eyes toward London, toward the palace. After 2 years of setbacks and difficulties shaking the monarchy's public image, this was their moment to show resilience, to prove they were still standing strong against the storm. This wasn't just any royal event. It was arguably the defining moment of the decade, perhaps even the defining royal event of the generation. Harry and Meghan flew in from California, bringing both children with them. The narrative that quickly unfolded was deliberate and carefully constructed. This was reconciliation, a family bridging the gap, healing old wounds, and finding their way back to one another across the ocean's divide.
Of destroying the British royal family, and that's what makes her so interesting to us.
The media released carefully curated photographs of Lilibet meeting her great-grandmother, the Queen, now an elderly woman, visibly tired yet present. These images were not accidental. They were orchestrated by a media team that understood their power intimately, photos bursting with warmth and humanity, simple yet profound moments that cut through cynicism. A child and her great-grandmother in the same room, sharing a tender, rare connection. The press responded exactly as the planners hoped. Headlines and stories flooded in, praising this as a touching reunion, a hopeful sign of healing. But inside royal circles, the story read differently. The word that repeatedly surfaced in leaks and whispered accounts filtering through journalists wasn't warmth, nor was it spontaneity. The term that kept emerging was calculated. A deliberate, strategically timed appearance by a couple who had spent nearly 2 years publicly distancing themselves from the monarchy, until now. They had spent months, if not years, claiming their step back from royal life, only to return on the most visible, most watched stage imaginable.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I think my book, Portrayal, landed just at the right moment, just as they were shifting.
It was a move that insiders saw for what it was, a carefully choreographed step back into the spotlight at what could only be described as the pinnacle moment of royal visibility in a generation. A calculated re-entry that sent ripples through the palace and beyond. Lilibet carried a name heavy with history and emotion, one that echoed deeply through the monarchy's recent past. When she met the Queen at the Jubilee, that moment was captured in a series of photographs that quickly rippled across the globe. Those images were no ordinary snapshots. They came to symbolize a rare and precious encounter. But just 3 months later, the Queen passed away. Suddenly, those photos took on an almost sacred significance. They became the final, timeless record of Lilibet and her great-grandmother sharing a room, forever etched in royal history. Whether anyone foresaw this outcome remains a mystery, but what we do know is how profoundly those pictures and their timing shaped a new dynamic. In a twist brimming with irony, the couple who had most publicly stepped back and distanced themselves from the monarchy were now in possession of something unique.
For Meghan, she's succeeded quite well in her life and her ambitions, so I was able to balance it all. I mean,
An exclusive, personal collection of the last moments shared with the woman who represented the very heart of this ancient institution. The world had witnessed their departure, their critical stance, Yet these final images were fully under their control, held tightly as a piece of a legacy no other relative possessed quite like this. Then, everything changed after the Queen's passing. With Charles ascending the throne, the rules that govern royal titles came into sharp focus. According to the official letters patent, royal titles are automatically granted to the children of the Prince of Wales. Since Harry was Charles's son, his children, Archie and Lilibet, didn't just become a prince's niece and nephew anymore. They instantly became grandchildren of a king. That shift meant Lilibet, by birthright, was now a princess. Not by request, not through negotiation, and certainly without any fanfare. It was automatic. Here's where the contradiction really hit hard. The very couple who had broadcast the denial of Archie's princely title worldwide, who had sat down with Oprah and framed it as an issue of institutional bias and a failure to protect a child of mixed heritage with the same privileges extended to others, now had a daughter who was a princess by the simple fact of royal birth. The question wasn't whether they would accept the title, it was how they would respond to this automatic elevation.
Them to the wolves. Who actually was not prepared to tell the truth on their behalf? I mean, it's complete fiction.
Royal insiders watched closely, and Bower's spotlight revealed a stark contrast. The public fight for acknowledgement had been loud, emotional, and global. Yet when the title arrived without them having to say a word, the response was quiet, almost silent. No statements, no public debate, no acknowledgement of the sharp irony. Just a clean, calm acceptance, wrapped in silence. This revealed something deeper. A carefully crafted strategy that cleverly played with royal ties without succumbing to the full weight of royal responsibilities. Accept the honor, but distance from the obligation. Take what the institution freely offers, then speak out against the institution itself. It was a remarkable balancing act, sharper and more obvious than ever before, and it certainly didn't escape notice. Then there was the christening. And this event laid bare the contradiction in the most vivid way possible. Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor was baptized not in some grand cathedral or historic chapel steeped in centuries of tradition. No senior royals were present to witness it. Neither the Archbishop of Canterbury nor any other high-ranking church official took part. Instead, this sacred rite unfolded far from the traditional royal stage, in California, away from the glare of centuries-old ceremonies and expectations, underlining the complex, evolving story of this unique family's journey. Outside the iron gates, a small group of British press stood waiting, not for pomp or grand ceremony, but for something markedly ordinary. There was no royal procession, no grand institution presiding, just a quiet, private gathering. Far removed from the grandeur usually associated with the name she carried, this was simply two parents making a choice about a significant moment in their daughter's life. At face value, it was unremarkable. Private christenings are common, intimate occasions where families gather based on personal beliefs and wishes. No one is ever required to make these heartfelt events public spectacles, and to insist otherwise would be the very kind of intrusion the Sussexes spent years resisting. But here's the catch. This decision didn't happen in a vacuum. It never has. This little moment hands you a doorway back to a much larger, more complicated story. Travel back with me to March 2021 to a chair facing Oprah Winfrey, where the world seemed to pause.
As well as a bracelet. Our dream girl, happy 5th birthday, Lily, the As Ever founder captioned her post alongside a white heart emoji.
It was in this moment that Harry and Meghan unveiled revelations that sent shockwaves across households everywhere. They disclosed private conversations that took place before Archie's birth, discussions within the royal family about whether he would receive a royal title. What pierced the public consciousness was not just the administrative question itself, but the undeniable implication wrapped within those carefully chosen words that race had played a part. That the institution had looked at the child of a mixed-race mother and, on some level, decided to withhold the full honor and recognition usually afforded. Within hours, the story exploded globally, becoming the most talked-about aspect of an already record-breaking interview. Suddenly, the entire narrative of why Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal life shifted. It wasn't just about avoiding relentless media scrutiny or seeking personal freedom. It was about protecting their family. They were stepping away from an institution that, in its most private moments, had cast a shadow over their child, messaging that he was somehow different. That truth reverberated worldwide, sparking critical conversations about race, inclusion, and the responsibilities of long-standing institutions. The Sussexes knew precisely the impact of their words. They aren't naive, and this was no off-the-cuff chat. The interview was meticulously planned, shaped by professionals, and it struck every target it was meant to. Now, let that powerful image contrast with the christening scene. The very same couple who transformed the issue of their child's royal title. From something bureaucratic to a global conversation about race, belonging, and institutional protection, chose to hold their daughter's christening far from those formalities. No royal chapel, no invitations sent to senior family members, no ceremony tied to the Church of England. Remember, by that time, their daughter was a princess of the United Kingdom by birthright. Yet, the event was quietly private, deeply personal, and disconnected from the institution that carried her title. Biographer Robert Lacey didn't portray this choice as a moral failure. It's simply not his style. Instead, it reveals the profound weight of private decisions made in a public world, where personal and institutional histories collide in complex, often painful ways. What made this moment truly significant wasn't just the event itself. It was what it unveiled about the deeper strategy guiding every choice the Sussexes had made since stepping away. A clear and consistent pattern emerged, one that showed how royal recognition was treated like a tool to be wielded selectively. Whenever royal status could boost their story, enhance their public image, provide a platform, or serve as a source of emotional leverage, they embraced it fully, using titles, recognition, and association to amplify their message. But when royal ties demanded something in return, whether it was fulfilling obligations, staying close to the institution, or playing by the monarchy's rules, the connection was quietly set aside, ignored without any admission of contradiction. This wasn't simple hypocrisy, where someone says one thing and does another. No, it was something far more calculated and specific. It revealed an operational approach that saw the monarchy not as a community you belong to or don't, but as a resource to tap when convenient and distance yourself from when the cost of association outweighed the benefits. Journalist Bauer identified this as the heart of his case. His argument didn't rest on claims of racial animosity or personal ill will, but on a thoroughly documented pattern, carefully cross-referenced and consistent across years of decisions and public comments. In that context, the christening wasn't just a private family affair. It was the clearest, single, most compelling piece of evidence pointing to this strategic approach. When Bauer's findings went public, the reaction from Harry and Meghan spoke volumes, though not with words, but with a specific kind of silence. This silence wasn't empty or passive. It carried weight, shape, and meaning. To those paying close attention, it communicated a deliberate message, one that was more powerful than any formal statement might have been. In the weeks following the release of Bauer's findings, that silence blanketed all things related to the Sussexes with a totality that told a story even louder than spoken words. Now, let's be clear about the resources available to Harry and Meghan at that time. As a matter of standard publishing practice, they were given advance copies of the material. An ethical and legal courtesy extended so that subjects can flag factual errors before the book's release. This meant Harry, Meghan, and their legal team had weeks, not just days, to scrutinize everything Bauer had put together. They had time to identify inaccuracies, prepare alternate narratives, consult with their lawyers, seek legal injunctions, or craft carefully worded preemptive statements designed to steer the conversation before the book hit shelves. And make no mistake, they took every one of those steps. This isn't just speculation, it's documented fact. For example, in 2021, Meghan took the Mail on Sunday to court over the publication of a private letter she had written to her father. That case went all the way to trial, and she won. A British judge found that her privacy had been breached, ordering the Mail on Sunday to publish a front-page acknowledgement of that ruling. This was a moment that underscored how seriously they approached controlling their public narrative and protecting their privacy. Further proof of just how intentional and calculated their public actions had been. This was a landmark legal win, a major triumph over one of the most powerful tabloid empires in the nation, achieved by a legal team that was not just skilled, but utterly fearless when it came to navigating the courtroom battles necessary to protect their client's story. This very same team remained intact when Bauer's book hit the shelves, bringing with it a barrage of detailed, sourced, and meticulously documented claims Claims about behaviors, conversations, and behind-the-scenes moments that sharply contradicted the polished public image carefully crafted over the years. What's truly striking is how no one stepped forward to challenge a single one of Bauer's allegations. No official denials, no nuanced clarifications, not even a carefully curated, spin-driven statement from any spokesperson trying to distance the family from the most explosive parts of the book. The response, or rather, the deafening absence of one, left legal experts scratching their heads. In this world of high-stakes image management, silence is never accidental or neutral. For a family with such deep pockets, a formidable legal infrastructure, and a proven track record of engaging in litigious battles when necessary, choosing not to respond wasn't due to a lack of means. It was a strategic choice, carefully weighed in the legal war room by advisors well-versed in court procedures and risk management. Why stay silent? The risk lies in the discovery process. Once you file a legal complaint against a source with detailed documentation, you open the door to an intense back and forth. Both parties must hand over emails, messages, internal documents, and provide sworn testimony, all under the scrutiny of legal examination. Ironically, the very process designed to root out dishonesty becomes the tool that exposes truths when the claims hold water. So this silence wasn't passive or neglectful. It was a calculated, intelligent legal stance, likely viewed as the safest way to avoid an even bigger legal quagmire. But alongside this legal silence, there was a second silence that many found just as revealing, the silence coming from the palace itself. Understand, the palace's relationship with silence is anything but simple. When Buckingham Palace wants a story erased from the public consciousness, they spring into action fast and hard. Statements are issued, trusted insiders briefed extensively, and a wave of counter-narratives floods the media until the original story withers under the weight of coordinated pushback. This method has been their playbook for decades, a masterclass in making uncomfortable stories vanish. Yet, with Bauer's book, none of that happened. No official rebuttals, no strategic leaks, no public relations blitz. Former royal correspondents and insiders immediately noticed the absence, understanding its significance on a deeper level. When the palace stays tight-lipped on a bombshell story involving a family member, it's rarely because they have nothing to say. Instead, it's a clear signal that this story serves a purpose, that somewhere in the details laid out by Bowers, the palace saw a portrayal that actually aligns with or even strengthens the narrative they prefer. The palace's approach to silence is nuanced. When they want a story buried, they actively engage behind the scenes, working tirelessly to draw it down. But when they want a story to breathe, to influence, to settle into public discourse, they retreat into complete silence, allowing the narrative to unfold on its own terms. In this case, their silence wasn't weakness. It was a calculated move, letting Bauer's account resonate while they watch and wait for what unfolds next. The story suddenly went quiet. Everything fell completely silent. But what Tom Bauer did to Harry and Meghan wasn't as straightforward as most people believe. The common takeaway seems simple. He damaged their reputation. The media coverage turned negative, and that was the end of it. But the truth is far more complex and far more impactful. Bauer didn't just dent the reputation the Sussexes had painstakingly built over the years. What he did was much deeper, much harder to bounce back from. Instead of merely breaking down their image, he completely replaced the entire story they had carefully crafted with an entirely different narrative. And that gap between these two narratives? That's the difference between a temporary setback and a fundamental collapse. For 3 years, the Sussexes presented an emotionally charged and carefully controlled story to the public. Picture this: 2 chairs, an interviewer clearly sympathetic to their side, and not a single question thrown their way that they hadn't rehearsed 1,000,000 times before. Their message was crystal clear from the very start. We were targeted, left vulnerable, pushed out, and ultimately chose to leave in order to survive. It was a narrative so tight and so personal that it was almost impossible to argue against. Every interview, every public appearance reinforced this story. It was powerful, emotionally gripping, and seemingly airtight. But Tom Bauer didn't confront that narrative head-on. He didn't offer a competing story and ask the public to pick sides. Instead, he took a far more precise and devastating approach. One step at a time, he laid out a sequence of decisions, carefully documented with dates, sources, and evidence that you simply couldn't ignore. The choice of their children's names, the Jubilee visit, the debate over official titles, the details of the private christening, and the extended silence. All filed neatly in chronological order. It was a methodical, almost surgical dismantling of the picture the Sussexes had drawn. Instead of asking people how to feel, Bower's presentation demanded people simply look at the facts. When you actually take a hard look, the image that emerges is strikingly different from the one Harry and Meghan had painted. This wasn't a couple crushed by an unyielding, hostile institution. Instead, it was two people who clearly understood the system they were critiquing, with remarkable clarity. They identified exactly which parts of the monarchy drew sympathy and goodwill, and which parts carried obligations and responsibilities. They leaned heavily on the monarchy's most sacred and private symbols to enhance their own brand while portraying that same institution as the source of their struggles. They pushed loudly for recognition and privilege when it suited them, but went silent when that recognition demanded anything in return. This shift in public perception didn't just stay in the realm of opinion. It had tangible impacts in the business and entertainment world. In 2023, Spotify ended its partnership with the Sussexes. Officially, they cited the volume of content as the reason, but the bigger story was more nuanced. The brand Harry and Meghan had been selling was almost entirely built on the authenticity of their personal story. Once that story was legitimately challenged, documented, and left unchallenged in the public eye, the commercial equation changed overnight. Business partners started quietly reconsidering the risk of continuing their associations with a narrative now mired in doubt and scrutiny. Netflix, meanwhile, took a slightly different route, but the underlying impact was the same. Their approach, while not identical to Spotify's, also reflected the same loss of confidence that followed once that carefully constructed personal narrative was called into question and no longer uncontested. The ripple effects of this recalibration continue to shape how the Sussex brand operates and is perceived, showing just how powerful a rewritten story can be. Not just in the court of public opinion, but in the world of commerce as well. The story circles back to where it all began, landing in a place hauntingly familiar. Announcements of new projects surfaced, only to stall indefinitely, hanging in limbo as entertainment journalists slowly measured each claim against Bower's meticulously documented accounts. It wasn't a dramatic cancellation or a bold public showdown, but something far more subtle and far more relentless: the gradual erosion of credibility. This is the slow, unglamorous unraveling that happens to public figures when their hold on their own narrative slips little by little. Month after month, the chasm grew between what was being said openly and the cold, concrete evidence laid out in Bower's records. That widening gap became the real headline, the story drifting further from its original telling. Hollywood, as it always does, responded in its own way, quick and unsentimental. When the metrics start shifting, when belief and trust waver, the industry moves on without hesitation. Yet Bower remains undeterred, even now insisting he's far from finished. He's made it clear that his sources continue to provide new information, his collection of documentation keeps expanding, and that he's already bracing for Meghan's forthcoming memoir. The next chapter of their story, polished and deliberately crafted by professional hands. Bower's signal couldn't be clearer. He plans to scrutinize her account with the same unsparing, methodical approach he's used all along, fact-checking every claim, every detail. That's the one wild card no one on their side seemed to anticipate. They built an empire, a public identity, and a sprawling media brand around their version of events. That story was delivered with heartfelt emotion and has been fiercely defended on that very emotional ground. But it was never constructed to endure the kind of objective, relentless scrutiny Bower brings to the table. Most grievances go unquestioned, but Bower chose to challenge every single one, stripping it back to facts rather than feelings. And so, in the end, the story finds itself not on expensive television sets, not in sunlit California gardens, nor tangled up in legal filings or social media drama, but in a simple, almost overlooked place, a single birthday post. Our dream girl. Happy 5th birthday, Lily, the post reads, comments turned off, silence carefully maintained. This is one of the most followed accounts on the platform, yet for this child's birthday, an event bursting with joy and community. The conversation has been completely muted. Why? Because the questions Bauer raised, the ones he's thoroughly sourced and documented across hundreds of pages, have never truly been answered. Instead, they've been quietly managed behind the scenes, locked away in the silence that comes with disabled comments. Bauer's career rests on one core insight. Those who believe they are safest from scrutiny are often the ones least prepared when real, methodical examination finally arrives. And so far, that insight has held true time and time again. If this video connected dots you hadn't seen before, the details mainstream headlines often skip, we want to hear from you. What do you think that silence really means? Is it a calculated strategy? A sign of something deeper? Or maybe something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We're genuinely curious about where you stand. If you found value in this deep dive, please hit that like button. It helps bring this story to more people who might think this chapter is already closed. Because based on the documented record, it's far from over. Don't forget to share it with someone who needs to see the bigger picture. And make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because when the next chapter breaks, you'll want to be right here, ready to catch every detail. Until then, see you in the next one.